This is episode 48 of the Gauntlet podcast. My name is Jason.
I'm Anna.
My name's Steve.
Awesome. Hey, Anna, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Listeners, that's writer and game designer Anna Kreider. We're going to talk to her a little bit later about her new project, The Watch, and some of the other things she's working on. But for now, let's start like we always do by talking about some of the games we've played. Hey, Steve, you wanted to say something else about a Star Wars game, right?
Surprise! All right. So
that's your running theme. I'm into it. It's good.
Right. So by the way, I hate to spoil next week. Next week, probably be talking about Imperial Assault. I'm sorry. So,
oh gosh,
I know.
It's the Star Wars cast. It's fine.
I know.
Yeah, it's fine.
So I played Star Wars World, and I've basically already talked about it. My opinion hasn't changed. It's pretty awesome. The one thing that I'm noticing is that XP progression seems a little bit slow. That is helped by what we've been doing the last couple weeks, which is using Rob Donahue's flags in place of bonds. And I've never been a huge fan of bonds, and Jason, I know you're the same. And so my experience after a couple of sessions is very positive. The first session was a little rough. But now that we're a little bit used to it, it's been, flowing really smoothly. And the flags, I know have we explained them on this podcast? I know you've talked about them on Discern Realities.
We've talked about them a fair amount, yeah. It's kind of like the way you envision your character, and they kind of signal to other players how you want those players to interact with your character. And if they interact with your character in that manner, then they get an XP. I think we've covered it before, right. Yeah, that's just a little quick
and their interaction, their triggering of that interaction allows you to show off something you think is special or interesting about your character, basically. And so flags is just a mechanical way to do that. You trigger somebody else's flag, interact with them in that way, and it usually causes some problems in the fiction or some tension or something, and everybody gets rewarded by XP at the end of the session. And what we've been doing, or what we did this past session, was keep track of who triggered what on whom mid-session, so that we could take the XP without waiting till the end of session. And I like that a lot better. It's a slight uptick on the bookkeeping, but it's a lot more immediate, and it's something you're looking out for at all times, because it can be your next step to getting an advancement or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And so there's a certain amount of fate-like compel-esque nebulousness regarding how to best do fate, or how to best do flags, rather. But I think it doesn't matter as much as it might in Fate. I don't know. We're still working with it. Like I said, it's the second session, but it's been a big hit so far. I'm a big fan of flags.
Yeah, I like flags a lot. I think one of the things, I'm using them in Dungeon World right now, and they're working great for us because we have like a rotating cast of players all the time. We very rarely have the same players from session to session, or we might have the same group for like 3 sessions or 4 sessions, then it switches. The flags are awesome because they are always valid, right? Until you decide to rewrite them because they're no longer interesting to you. But for the most part, they're always valid. Like, they can always be used. Whereas the bonds, they get torn to shreds, like, pretty quickly.
Right.
Like, they're dependent on having this, certain people at the table all the time. And so, for that reason alone, I kind of like them. Are you going to petition Drew to change his game?
I'm so far, I had such bad experiences with. Actually, I didn't have terrible experiences with bonds. I just had no experiences with bonds. They just didn't seem like they belonged when I played When I played Dungeon World, at least.
Yeah, he and I were chit chatting about it for a bit. I think he thinks it's cool that you're enjoying the game the way that's going to work for your group.
I'm so biased, is what I'm saying. That I'll put my 2 cents in, but he needn't spend those pennies.
Indeed. Awesome. Is there anything else you want to say about it?
No, that's about it.
Anna, what have you been playing?
So, amusingly, in our normal group, we've actually been playing Star Wars World.
Okay. Yay. Can I just say, though, Drew Medeiros has been getting so much play on our podcast, like the last 10 episodes for different reasons, but he's probably blushing right now.
I'm really enjoying giving him crap about it, so it's been great for me.
Awesome. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
This past weekend, I went to Breakout Con, which is a small regional con that was in Toronto. And, I got a chance to actually try out masks for the first time.
Oh, cool.
I've been hearing a lot of great stuff about it, so I was really curious to give it a try. Yeah, there's a lot of super interesting stuff about masks, some really cool innovations I haven't seen in other Powered by the Apocalypse games. And I'm really jonesing to, give it, a longer than just a one-session kind of play.
Yeah, I've been hearing that about masks. I haven't played it myself yet, but we've talked about it a couple times on the podcast. I've heard that it compares really favorably to Monster Hearts, in the sense that, it kind of uses its like setting or it's Monster Hearts uses monsters as kind of a metaphor for like the teenage experience or whatever, right? And not having control over your body and that kind of thing. And do you think that's kind of is there a similar thing going on with Masks?
Oh, yeah. Except instead of not having control over your body, it's really like not knowing what makes you you. So instead of having stats, you have basically labels, and they're rated from -3 to +3. And depending on your archetype, you start at different ratings or whatever. But basically, anyone with influence over you can, which is kind of like the Masks equivalent of strings. It's not directly analogous, but
yeah.
Basically, they can tell you who you are. So they could say, hey, man, like, you're a superhero now, you gotta do what needs to be done and leave your old life behind, and basically tell you to shift your danger up but lower your mundane, just as an example. And then you get to decide what you want to do with that. So either you say, yeah, like, that's, you're right, and you take that advice and you shift your labels accordingly, or you can try and reject that influence. And there's some pretty interesting fictional stuff that happens if you succeed, and some interesting stuff that happens if you don't. And yeah, it's very Monster Heartsy in that you're definitely playing to figure out who you are. And there's even like adult superhero moves that you can take. Yeah.
Like when you've been playing long enough, the way the Monster Hearts has the advanced or whatever. Oh, that's really
the
cool.
growing up moves.
Yeah, and retiring as an adult superhero is an option. So
Nice.
instead of like retiring to safety, you could grow up and become a real superhero.
Awesome.
So there's a lot of super interesting stuff there. I just really would love to take it for a longer spin. It was, it was like a 3-hour con game, so it was enough to get a taste of the archetypes that were
whet your
playing.
appetite, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool, awesome. Yeah. So it sounds like what you're saying was other people's opinion of your character informs your stats. Is that right?
They can if they have influence over you. So not everyone on your team. Maybe you would start with would have influence over you. It kind of varies by archetype, but the awesome thing is that any adult automatically starts with influence over you, which is amazing.
Yeah.
Cool. Is there anything else you want to say about it?
I guess not really a whole lot. Yeah, like I said, I mean, I think there's a lot of interesting innovations on the PBDA stuff, and I'd love to give it a longer go. I thought it was pretty cool.
I love how all the new PBTA games that are coming out kind of take the lessons of the of the ones that came before and kind of build on them and mix them around. I think it's an exciting time to be involved in role-playing games because, some people say, oh, PBTA, like there's so much. But I think I don't know, like to me, I think it's so cool. I love the way it's kind of unlocked people's creativity. I don't know. I'm really into it. Cool. Awesome. I got a chance to run 3 sessions of Blades in the Dark. I know a few people are waiting to hear what I have to say about Blades in the Dark. It's a hard game to talk about. I have very, very similar complicated feelings for this game as I do to Burning Wheel. It's doing a lot of really awesome, cool things. It has these neat subsystems. It's got just lots of cool, innovative things going on that I'd never seen before. But put all together, it kind of equals a game that I kind of don't want to play. And that's kind of where I'm at with Blades in the Dark. I don't think I have enough experience with it yet, so it's a qualified opinion. There were some things, let me talk about the things I liked. There were a lot of things I actually did quite like about the game that are brilliant. I love that the game, I should say, Blades in the Dark, I'm sure everyone knows what it is, but just in case you don't, it is like a whale punk or or electro punk sort of game where you all play members of a thieves crew or some kind of like criminal crew. You go on you take jobs, you go on missions and things like that, and you're kind of building up your crew. That's essentially what it is. And it's inspired a lot by like video games like Dishonored. I think that's one of its direct influences.
And Thief. The Thief series is very
and the Thief
prominent.
series, right? Yeah. That's what Blades in the Dark is for the 2 people out there who don't know what that is. I love a lot of what it's doing. It's definitely designed for long-term play. And if you were going to play this game for 20 or 30 sessions, it has some really, really interesting tools available to you to sort of track all of that progression. You have like this system called clocks, where you have all these clocks that are laid out and are tracking different dangers or different opportunities that you are facing or pursuing, and you can kind of always glance at those and kind of see how where everything is, like how everything stands in relationship to one another, right? So, I know that the Lamp Blacks are trying to put out a contract on my head, and that's progressing at a certain rate. I know that the Red Sashes are trying to find our hideout. They're doing everything they can to find our hideout, and so that's progressing. And I've got a clock over here that shows my progress. Let's say I'm working on getting in good with this guy over in this neighborhood. And so that's something I can work on periodically, and I can, mark off some segments on the clock. I like that you can kind of, at a glance, kind of see everything that's going on in the little world you've created. I think it's really cool. Same thing with the crew tracking sheet. There's lots of granular information so that you can look and see, pretty quickly, like all the different things that are kind of going on with your crew. And so I think that's really, really cool.
I also like, sort of feeding into that, is the factions sheet, where you keep track of all of these various factions, and of which there are a ton in the city, and you're standing with them, like basically which ones don't know you exist, which ones hate you, and which ones would be, willing to do a favor. That one's pretty cool too.
Yeah. It's just got so many comprehensive systems for like tracking long-term play. I think it's really cool. Another thing I like about the game, the setting is just really neat. Now we were using a quick start, so we didn't have like all of the setting material, but even just a little bit we have in the quick start is really quite interesting. It has two mechanical things that are pretty neat that I had never really seen before in a game. One was called flashbacks. When your crew is like working on a job and you run into a problem, you can have what's called a flashback, and it essentially lets you kind of rewind and like show how your character prepared ahead of time for this eventuality, right? So we get to a particularly tough safe that we're trying to crack, and so we have a flashback to show how we created some device or some tool that would help us break into this safe, right? That kind of thing. It's a neat way of like showing the planning that goes on into being like a crack team of criminals without having to actually do all the planning, right? So,
flashbacks combined, especially with your, what do they call them, approaches? If you're like going in,
your engagement, like the way you approach the job that you're doing.
Yeah, those two things combined mean your planning is like 25, 30 seconds, right?
Yeah, it's kind of like summarizes like the planning that your crew did,
right?
Without it feeling cheap, like you skipped anything, right? So it's pretty neat. And then this other thing that it does is called the Devil's Bargains, and that's a little bit similar to like the compels in Fate, I guess, is probably a good analogy there, a good comparison. Essentially, when someone's getting ready to make a roll, anybody at the table, the GM or a player, can offer that player a Devil's Bargain. This is a meta thing. It's a table, at the table thing. You say, hey, if you take this complication, if you allow that this complication will happen, you get an extra die. It's a way of causing the characters' lives to be, like you can kind of introduce some complications into the character's life to make things a little more interesting. And if they take that, they get a die, an extra die to roll. And that's pretty powerful. So I really enjoyed that. Those are some really cool things that I liked. And, the flashbacks and Devil's Bargains in particular, I could see myself using something like that in maybe as a custom move or something, like in a PBTA game. I just like the idea of them, and they worked pretty well at the table.
Playing a heist game without something like the flashback mechanics is just folly, I think. They work so well.
Yeah, well, because you're gonna get so caught up in like the nitty-gritty details and stuff, right, of planning the job.
Yeah.
So I like that it lets you kind of summarize all that stuff and not have to get too bogged down in it. So the things I didn't really care for in the game, the things that, at least in our 3 sessions, were pretty difficult for me, I felt like the rules were getting in the way all the time. I felt like I constantly had to refer to the rules to like adjudicate things. There are so many different scales of effect and different types of outcomes and lots of terminology. I mean, lots and lots of terms of art in this game. And I felt like I was constantly referring to that. And so that was kind of slowing us down a bit. That might get better with mastery, but I'm not 100% sure that a lot of those rules were doing much to aid our enjoyment either. So I'm not sure what if it's worth mastering it, right?
Effort versus reward was a little high.
It really was. It has some confusing terminology. There are lots of words that mean specific things in the game, but like sound really similar to each other. Like stress, trauma, and harm, for example. Those are 3 very different things in the game, but they kind of sound kind of the same. Same thing with some of the skills and some of the actions. There's a lot of like, it was not easy just based off the game's language to differentiate things, and this game has a lot of stuff going on. And then there were whole parts of the game that I felt like were really just kind of left to GM fiat. So it felt kind of funny that this game has so many rules and procedures in place, so many layers of things, but a lot of the time it just ended up kind of being like the GM making a call. I thought that was a little strange. Having said all that, the game is doing a lot of cool things. I'm in love with the setting, and there are certain parts of it that I think are really, really neat. I just am not sure that the amount of sessions it wants and the amount of time it wants to master it, I'm just not sure it's kind of where I'm at right now in my gaming life. So those are my thoughts. Yeah,
I was in the game as well, and that pretty much sums up my feelings as well.
Yeah, I'm kind of on the fence about whether I want to give it another shot. I might wait for the final version of the final version of the rules to be out before I do it again. As it stands right now, this game definitely is going to have an audience, right? There are people out there who are going to love this stuff. There are a lot of people who just they're going to love all the tracking. They're going to love all of the bookkeeping. They're going to love all of this, this progression. The progression, that's another thing. The progression is very, very slow.
Oh, God, yes.
They're going to love all that stuff, and that's awesome. I just think it's maybe not for me.
So actually, I shouldn't say that sums up my position, because this sums up my position. I haven't played Burning Wheel, but my read-through of the books gives me the same impression as basically what you're saying. And I want to play both Burning Wheel. I want to give it a shot, an extended run, the same way I do this game. But for Burning Wheel, it's only so that I can finally, conscience-free, sell my books. And for
no, keep those books. No, keep them. The thing about Burning Wheel, I don't want to go into a Burning Wheel thing, but like the thing about Burning Wheel, I love the way Luke handles fantasy. I love the way he addresses a lot of the tropes of fantasy. I think it's brilliant. It has so many different like individual mechanics that are so cool and so innovative.
Oh yeah,
and I'm really into it. But it's just kind of one of those things where I just kind of feel like maybe game design has moved on a little bit. That sounds terrible to say, but that's just kind of how I feel. So.
But for this game, I want to give it a go, and I feel like I might end up feeling as if it were worth it, gaining some mastery over the system.
Yeah. I think this one, Blades, is going to be much easier to master than Burning Wheel.
Yeah.
Like, it's not a direct comparison there. I mean, I'm comparing them just in the sense that, man, I love a lot of what this game is doing. I'm just not sure it's for me. So, cool. And that's all I have to say. So why don't we move on to the next segment? Our next segment is Giving Me Life. Steve, what's giving you life?
All right, so what's giving me life this week? I know you have a fondness for the literal giving me lives, giving me lives, whatever.
I do like those, yeah.
This week, or I should say about a week ago, I was dismantling a fence in the backyard and was, very, very happy with my progress, not realizing there were like 40 exposed nails just shooting skyward, and I managed to step on a nail. And so what's giving me life this week is tetanus shot.
Tetanus shot? A booster?
Yes, here's why. I made the mistake of looking up the symptoms for tetanus. Tetanus is very rare. It probably wouldn't have happened anyway. There's like 40-something cases in the U.S. every year, I think.
Right.
If you go to Wikipedia and just look at the prominently placed illustration of tetanus, it's a guy who, without context, might be doing a breakdancing move, but what's actually happening, it's a painting, it's not an actual picture. What's actually happening is he's maybe dying, but having severe muscle spasms and cramps, and it just looks terrible. Really, genuinely awful. And I'm glad I don't have to worry about that, because it was not a clean wound at all. Yeah.
Oh, so a close call is giving you life. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, pretty much. Hey, you guys, I'm alive. No muscle spasms.
Awesome. We're happy you're
keeping
alive.
it clean. Yeah.
Awesome. Anna, what's giving you life?
Nothing as literal as a tetanus shot.
That's good.
So the thing that's giving me life right now is, I'm gonna embarrass Drew again.
Oh, it's another bingo square for me.
Yeah, I know, right?
I got one for Star Wars and one for Drew. Cool.
So we recently started doing external playtesting of the watch, and it's going super well, and I'm really pleased and really excited. It's one thing to bounce a draft of a game back and forth, and even play like a couple playtests with your home group who likes to play the way that you do, and you kind of know how to run it the way that they like to play. It's really cool seeing other people play it and enjoy it, and, there's definitely polishing to be done, but just having a lot of fun. Especially because this is the first game that I've ever co-designed.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, so I'm having a whole lot of fun with the whole process and just seeing people have fun with it.
I was one of those people who play tested it.
Yes, you were.
And I loved it. I thought it was great. And we're going to talk about it in a minute, but I think you guys are really onto something with this game. It is cool. I think it's going to be awesome when you guys get ready to finally, launch it for Kickstarter and stuff. So
thank you.
I am excited. Cool. Yeah. Co-designing. That's awesome. I imagine, particularly working with Drew, right? I can't imagine like a better person to like work on anything with, he's awesome.
He's pretty awesome. Especially at, he's just disgustingly quick at writing moves. It's frankly makes me jealous.
Yeah.
He had the watch from concept to like alpha draft in something absurd like 4 days.
Oh my goodness!
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe
wow.
5. Maybe.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah.
So far, you guys, I mean, the game is cool. I think we're going to talk about it. I don't want to talk too much about the watch right now because we're going to get to it. But awesome. Cool. The thing giving me life this week is Slack. Slack, it is like a group chat thing. It's like a team-based group chat, I guess, essentially, or kind of like workplace productivity application. You can get it for desktop and you can get it for iOS and Android and all that as well. And the reason why it's giving me life is because the Gauntlet is getting to be kind of a bit of a production, and there are lots of things going on now, which is awesome. It's great. It's a good problem to have. But we've got multiple podcasts. We have a third podcast on the way with, different people involved in those. We have our gigantic gaming calendar that is there's always something humming on that, like dozens and dozens of events. And we've got a number of little side, like sort of in development projects, underway. And it was starting to become a bit of a hard thing for me to handle because all of the communication was happening in like 10 different places, There was G+ chat, there was G+ post, there was, the random meetup message, there was, stuff in Google Docs. It was just all over the place. And I've got everybody in Slack now. And it's great. You're all in a little, everyone's in their own little box. So I know I can go and I can see exactly what's going on. It's awesome. I think it's really, really improving kind of just how we work on Gauntlet stuff. And I really love it. And it seems like everybody's having fun with it too. It's kind of just a fun place for, for people to kind of just like chit chat and talk about things. So, it's neat and it's making my life a lot easier. And, with that, we shall get on to the interview. Okay, so we are here with Anna Kreider to talk about principally the watch, but also some other sort of gaming-related questions. Anna, give us just an overview of what the watch is about.
So the watch is a low fantasy powered by the apocalypse that I am co-designing with Andrew Medeiros, aka Drew, who's the co-designer of Urban Shadows, and recently kickstarted The Forgotten.
Another very cool game. Yeah, I played that one as well with him.
I could go on, but I won't. So yeah, the watch, low fantasy game. You're basically playing a group of all-female soldiers whose homeland has been invaded by this nebulous threat called the Shadow. When the Shadow invaded, it started taking over all the men and making them basically go crazy and attack their own people. The people have basically pulled back, have formed a new boundary, and have formed a new army that is all female and other gender identities that aren't male. And they're trying to fight to take back their homeland. So that's the basic idea in a nutshell.
Awesome, yeah. Since you mentioned gender there, or all genders that don't identify as men, how does the game account for transgendered women? I think that's something people are going to want to know about.
So the funny thing about transgender identities is that's actually easier than, non-binary and gender fluid and genderqueer. The thing about the Shadow is if you say that trans women aren't resistant to the Shadow, then you're saying that their gender identity isn't real because biology, which is horrific.
Right.
So, for the purposes of, as far as the Shadow is concerned, it looks into your heart and sees what's there.
Got it. Okay.
The same thing goes for trans men, saying that they are resistant to the Shadow because whatever would be equally horrific. So, it's more the middle ground that's a bit harder, and we're currently talking with some folks to make sure that we get that right, because both Drew and I are unremittingly cisgender.
Some people are going to ask just like, why was it important that all of the protagonists be women? Like, why was that part of your goal here?
So this was originally Drew's idea after he saw John Sheldon's documentary about, diversity and inclusion in the games industry. And so he just kind of messaged me and was like, hey, I have an idea for like a, military campaign powered by the apocalypse where all the characters are women. And I got really excited, and I was just yelling ideas at him until he was like, do you want to co-design it with me? It was originally part of the concept, but I think the reason why I feel very attached to it is just because I don't feel like there are a lot of games that are explicitly about women's stories.
Right.
There are a lot of games where you can play women, and Powered Up by the Apocalypse is generally pretty great for that because of what Vincent started and what has been mostly carried through with the different gender options.
Yeah.
Right.
I really like the idea of having a game where you are required to play not men.
Right, yeah. I with my experience with the game, which was just one session, which was at Dreamation, I thought it was really awesome because there were times in the game when I wasn't really even thinking about my character's gender. Like, it didn't really occur to me. It was, I was having fun engaging the moves. I was having fun with the story. But then there were other times when the moves, like, triggered certain interactions, and I thought, I don't think I've ever seen, or I've never been a part of a game where we've seen two women have a relationship like this or an interaction like this. So, for example, we had two characters. One was like kind of a mentor. That was the one you played, if I recall. Mm-hmm. Like kind of an older, like kind of more of a mentor commander type. And then we had another character who was much younger. And there was like a really interesting, like sort of mentor mentee kind of thing going on. And like at that moment, I thought, I don't think I've ever seen this kind of interaction. Like, you don't see this often in media. You don't see this often in different types of media. You don't see this sort of like relationship between women. It's just not a thing that you see very much. And I thought it was really, really cool. Like, I thought it was cool that the game kind of gave you those sorts of experiences. But did I have the right experience?
I don't want to tell anyone that they had the right or wrong experience.
Right, yeah. I mean, but was that what you were going for, though? Like, is it meant to sort of, like, fade into the background, but also, like, come to the foreground at times? I mean, because that's how it felt to me.
So I can only speak to this from my experiences as a woman. Obviously, my experience is going to be very different from your experience not being a woman.
Yeah.
What you said about witnessing an interaction that's not the sort of thing that you see, I don't know, that's not really my experience. I see those interactions because I live them.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I think everyone is going to get different things out of it. Again, I think just the important thing for me is that the game forces you to not only tell women's stories, but tell women's stories that aren't like the stereotypical women's stories. I mean, the watch is structured around a military campaign. I mean, we took a lot from Night Witches in that regard. This is about women fighting to hold on to who they are and to retake what's theirs. And as such, that's going to produce some stories that are pretty unlike a lot of role-playing games out there. Yeah, and I do want to acknowledge that we do owe, there are things that we have taken from Night Witches specifically. The idea of having a structured military campaign.
Sorry, on the subject of the military campaign, is there a structure does that give a skeleton to the game that you go on different missions, or how does that work exactly? There's
basically 3 different phases, and each phase has a list of, I think, 6 missions, and you have to do 5 to move on to the next phase. And there are things like the first is entrenching and defending the new border, and the next phase is pushing out and retaking the land that formed the old border, and the last phase is kind of taking the fight to the Shadow. The very last mission is invading the Shadow stronghold. So it does have a very purposeful arc to the story. And what winds up happening with the missions is very similar to Night Witches, where you go out on a mission, and the mission generates all kinds of complications.
Right,
and then you come back, and you have to pick up the pieces and put yourself back together and find a way to keep going.
Well, so speaking of moves, this is something that always interests me whenever like new Powered by the Apocalypse games are coming out. Which do you think are like, what are your favorite like moves or mechanics from the game? Like, what is the watch doing that's like particularly cool?
So my favorite move is definitely Open Up to Someone, because it's tied to Valor, and it really is keyed into the fact that it takes courage to open up to someone. I just love the way it's written, and the consequences for the miss are equally compelling, that sometimes people misunderstand each other. And every time I've seen someone use that in play, there's been some really great moments that have come out of that. So yeah, my favorite kind of mechanical framework is the worksheet for the Shadow, where you basically go through and pick all the options for your fronts and threats. Before you start playing, there's a lot of different options for defining the Shadow. So what the Shadow is, what the Shadow wants, and what the Shadow does. So for what the Shadow is, some of the options are like darkly sorcerous or technological or reality warping. For what the Shadow wants, you have things like it wants men to serve without emotion, or another one is it wants women to serve with gladness and delight.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's really good. Like
I'm super proud of that one.
It's good. That's really good.
And then for what the Shadow does, kind of describes different options for how it actually operates. Like it turns women into objects of veneration and worship, or stuff like that. that's definitely one of my favorite things, because it means that each campaign is kind of customizable depending on, what the MC or what the group is interested in having their threat look like.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's cool. One of the things that I recall from my play of the game was there's the move, if I'm getting it wrong, tell me, but I think it's blow off steam. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, I loved that move so much because I don't recall ever seeing anything like that in another PBTA game. And the reason why it really worked so well, I thought, was because the situation that these characters are in is so tense and fraught and dire and difficult. And there were moments there were really, really emotional moments around the table. It was like, oh man, this just feels so hard right now. And, in a good way though, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then you had this blow off steam move that whenever it triggered, there was a tone shift that felt like welcome, and
mm-hmm.
it led to just some really, really lovely scenes where there was light within this darkness, and that was my personal favorite aspect of the game. I love for the tone, a roller coastering sort of tone like that, heavy with levity, interspersed, and I thought that blow off steam move was really, really great. So, and I don't recall seeing a move like that. I don't know if Night Witches had something like that or not. I don't remember it if it did, but
yeah,
it may have had something like that. I don't recall, but I like how it was implemented in the Watch for sure. It was really, really neat.
I think Night Witches, the only real close equivalent would be Reach Out.
Yeah.
Which kind of isn't the same.
It's a little different, right? Yeah, it's not quite the same thing.
Yeah. Blow Off Steam is super interesting, especially because it can look like a lot of different things in play. Just to use the example from Dreamation, I thought your character's relationship when you blew off steam by being romantic with each other, that was super adorable.
Oh yeah. yeah. I'm trying to remember. Yeah, it was enjoyable. Yeah.
But then there was the wolf who blew off steam by just beating the shit out of some practice dummies.
Right. Yeah.
What that winds up looking like, you have some really interesting differences that come out.
Listeners, I can't stress enough how you guys need to get on this as soon as it kickstarts. It's going to be so cool. Okay, well, why don't we just go ahead and what's next for the Watch? Where are you guys at as far as the development goes?
So right now, it's really just playtesting. We took it as far as we could get it with our home group. I'm still going to be running it. Actually, it's next up for once we finish our current campaign of Star Wars World. But it's just about getting it into the hands of some other people and getting feedback from them. We're definitely going to be running it at Gen Con.
Cool. Drew
and I are both going. But aside from that, it's a little hard to comment on timelines just because Drew has a day job and I'm a full-time student right now.
Right, yeah. Mm. Life interrupts, right?
Yeah.
I wish you guys the best of luck with it. I think it's going to be so cool when it's finally done. Let's move on to just a couple of more gamey questions, I guess, game-related questions.
Sure.
How'd you get into game design? And who were some of the influences on your work?
So the funny thing about how I got into game design is there was a setting design contest on the Forge back in, 2006, I think.
Okay.
A million years ago, basically. And it was just a challenge to see who could shift a game the most by just changing the setting. And so I hacked Polaris to, instead of being basically ice elves at the North Pole, I wrote it about the Reconquista era of the Crusades, specifically in Spain. That was the bones of what ultimately turned into the Outbred Warrior.
Right.
Yeah, it was actually Ben who emailed. He actually emailed all of the 4 participants who had hacked Polaris and said, "Hey, if you guys want to publish, I'm happy to work with you." And so that kind of got me started. I wouldn't have gotten started without Ben because I honestly hadn't even thought about it.
Okay.
The Outbred Warrior actually won the contest.
Right.
And there were some people who were really enthusiastic. But even then, it was the next year, it was Vincent Baker, Jason Morningstar, and Joshua Newman, who all kind of separately was like, "So when are we going to see this published?"
Right, yeah.
So, that was really the kick in the pants that I needed to finish it. But even after I published it in 2008, I still argued with people for 2 years after that oh no, I'm not a real game designer.
Oh, yeah.
I only wrote one hack.
Right.
So it kind of took a lot longer for me to really own that identity of being a game designer.
That's a thing, isn't it? It's
yeah.
I think I guess I have a game under my belt that I've designed that's playable, right? And all my friends have had great fun with it, but it still to me just feels like just a little lark, just a little thing I did that doesn't mean anything, I think it's difficult to assume those mantles because you look at like other people in the space and you think, and I talk to them all the time, right? And you think like they're doing something different than I am, but I don't know if they are. I'm not sure they are, but
I think it comes down to feeling like you have permission to be in the space of being a game designer. And I know that's more of a thing for women.
Definitely, right, yeah.
In terms of hacking being seen as real game design, I mean, I've been around long enough that it definitely wasn't always the case that hacking was seen as game design. People would say, oh, well, hacks aren't real game design. I feel like Sage Adam and John Harper have really shut people up on that front.
Yeah.
If something makes as much money as Dungeon World or Blades in the Dark, sorry, it's real game design. But then you kind of get those people moving the goalposts of, oh, well, original system design is better than hacking because you're creating something new, which I think is a real tragedy because, I mean, like we were talking about before, there's some really interesting innovation that is happening around the framework of Powered by the Apocalypse.
Yeah, for real.
Some really clever things that are happening that are building on the tools created by what came before it. So there's definitely can be some imposter syndrome around, like, oh, well, you know, like, I'm not like Jason Morningstar or, you know, Emily Care Boss or McGay Baker or anything like that. But I think partly, too, there's a lot of identity politics that happens around who gets to call themselves a game designer. And it's kind of unfortunate.
Well, so that's actually a pretty good segue into my next question. It's an intentionally vague question. So do you think there's something missing in gaming?
I think there's a diversity of perspective, you know, and a lot of that comes from a lack of diversity of faces. But it also comes from, like, what's being written about. I swear to God, if I never have to play a Crypto Europe fantasy setting ever again.
Steve will echo you on that. I love...
High five, yes.
So bored.
I love my McEurope fantasy, so I disagree with you on that, but...
And let me tell you, like, I have a problem with elves. Like, I need a 12-step program for elves, okay? So I say this as someone who quotes the extended edition Lord of the Rings, not even, you know, vanilla. But, yeah, I'm so bored with Crypto Europe fantasy. Jesus. You know, I mean, just from a standpoint of, like, what would improve the industry? Like, come on, can we get some new stuff in here?
Well, Anna, you don't just want to do the exact same thing over and over and again for 4 decades?
No, not so much.
Get out.
I think part of the way we need to increase that diversity of perspective is we need to get more people writing games who aren't white guys.
Yeah.
And I recognize that I say this as someone with a lot of privilege. I am a white cisgendered able-bodied woman, but I don't want to just make room for people who look like me. Like, if we make room for white women to design games, that's not really enough.
Yeah.
You know, both from a awful social justice perspective, but also from the perspective of, think how many awesome games that just aren't being written because people don't feel like they get to be in the space.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, you know, I'm thinking of games like Dog Eat Dog, Steal Away Jordan. Those are games that, you know, I was an adult in the 90s playing role-playing games, and I don't think I ever would have thought, like, we would get a role-playing game like that, right? That has that really, you know, that kind of perspective, right? And we've talked about those games before, so our listeners should know what they are, but you're right. You know, like, it would be a real tragedy, you know, if it is a tragedy that we don't have more stuff like that. Like, just the very fact that those two games stand out so brightly as far as, like, games that represent, like, you know, like, historically oppressed, you know, perspectives or whatever is really, you know.
Yeah, it's such a stark contrast.
It's a handful of games, right? Like, I don't think there are not enough of them, basically, is what I'm getting at. Like, those are always, like, the go-to examples, even.
Well, they don't even need to necessarily be games like Thou Art But a Warrior or Steal Away Jordan or games that focus on oppression.
Right, yeah.
Even just games that look at things from a different angle, like the not white dude angle. You know, sure, I mean, yeah. and the thing for me is that, like, so one of the pieces that I did on my blog about a month ago was I was looking at the statistics of funding for tabletop RPGs on Kickstarter in 2015. I looked at every single successfully funded tabletop campaign. There were 388 it took forever.
There's a tremendous amount of research in that article. I read your blog, so I'm always impressed by the amount of research that goes into it. But
thank you. But yeah, only 6% of all of those campaigns were fronted by women in 2015. And unless you actually think that men really are that much better at game design than women, that means that the hobby has a problem. It means that there's a lot of content that's just not getting written. And, you know, like we're talking about all of this great work that's being done with Powered by the Apocalypse, and that people are building on what came before, and it's really enriching the hobby. But the hobby is poorer for not having those voices that should be here.
I agree.
Yeah, absolutely.
I agree. Cool. Well, do you have anything else going on as far as like anything you're working on as far as like your blog or game design or anything like that? Do you have any sneak peeks? We love sneak peeks on the Gauntlet podcast. So we love exclusive looks. If you don't have anything, it's fine. But
Unfortunately, I don't have anything I can talk about.
Okay, that's fair. No, that's totally fair.
So I do have some stuff I'm excited about,
Okay, sure,
but it's like early days and
yeah. Well, we'll keep our eyes on it. We'll have you back when you're ready to talk about it. So,
yeah.
No, it's totally cool. Awesome. Well, now we go to the final question. You have to indulge us on this because this is...
But by the way, Jason, I just wanted to call out, I'm always a fan of the final question, but this is, I think, my favorite one.
It took me forever to think of it. It was really, really... Well, no, because I wanted it to be really good. So, like, because it has to be... It has to build on the final question.
I'm excited.
That have come, right? They have to get better and better, right? So, okay, here's the final question, Anna. You ready?
Okay.
Let's say we're playing a game called Thou Art But a Werewolf. It's already good, right? Our protagonists are smooth-chested, lycanthropic male underwear models who sleep late, do recreational drugs, and party with other conventionally beautiful people on rooftops of hotels. Every now and then, during a full moon, they also change into terrifying wolf beasts and murder everyone in sight. Two-part final question. First part, what is our key phrase that opens play? And second part, instead of lighting a candle, what ritual do we observe to indicate that the game has started and ended? We go through this really important and heavy mention of diversity in games, and now we do the naked werewolf question. So it's awesome.
No, it's cool. You gotta let me move. So, all right, the phrase that opens play, I would have to go with, on the roof of the hotel, the lycanthropes were sexy. But the sexy times would be lost, for our protagonist still heard the song of the moon in his blood.
Oh, that's so good. Okay, it's so good. I love it. All right.
Excellent.
All right, what's our ritual?
It still involves a candle, but at the opening of the game, you would light your candle and then burn a picture of Edward Cullen.
Yes, okay, good.
And then at the end of the game, you would blow out the candle and then make a ritual gesture of obeisance to Taylor Lautner.
Awesome. That's very good.
Yes.
I love it.
Very good.
Cool. Well, Anna, this was super fun. Is there anything else you want to talk about? What we got you?
Not...
Wait, I'm sorry. This is very important.
Okay.
On a scale of 0 to 10, how shirtless is Taylor Lautner?
Well, what counts as
what
counts as 0 and 10?
0 wearing a burqa and 10
Yes.
completely shirtless.
Yeah, no, you've dealt with this scale before. Yeah, you got it.
0 burqa.
Well, obviously 10.
Excellent. Okay. All right.
Yeah, right? I mean, no, it's got to be like the Twilightiest poster you can find of him.
Awesome. Well, this was a lot of fun, Anna. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Listeners, that's our show. If you would like to get a hold of us or interact with us, that's weird, right? If you would
like to interface with the Gauntlet.
Yes, go to Google Plus and search the community section for the Gauntlet. You will find us there. We also have a game calendar on Meetup called Gauntlet Hangouts. I think the link for that can also be found in our G Plus community. We are running lots and lots of games all the time. So go find us and play a game with us. And we're on Twitter. Theoretically, we're on Twitter. I don't know because I almost never check it and I don't tweet. But if hey, encourage me to by following us at Gauntlet RPG. So that's all I've got. Thanks again, Anna.
Thank you.
And thanks, Steve.
Thank you much.
Thanks, listeners. Listeners, that's writer and game designer Anna Kreider. A little bit later, we're going to talk to her about her new project. Talked with fucking Christ. Why can't I talk today? What the hell? God, sorry. Oh, man. I'm all tongue-tied now. This is crazy.
See, now you're thinking about it.
Yep.
I know. Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah, you're right. All right. Stop wasting our time. Hold on.